My screen's rolling. Welcome. This webinar is entitled 7 Steps to Making Your Content Accessible in Canvas. I am Helen Graves, an instructional designer with the CVC OEI, which stands for California Virtual College Online Education Initiative. And in today's webinar, I'm going to show you how really very easy it is, or it can be, to ensure that your Canvas pages are formatted to make them accessible. One little caveat, I have dual screens, so even though the camera is here, there will be many times when I'm looking over here because I want to make sure I'm demonstrating and doing things properly. So my apologies in advance that I'm not always looking you in the eye when I'm talking, just the nature of the beast. So Zoom does have a chat feature. If you're not familiar with Zoom yet, you'll see it in the menu bar down at the bottom of the Zoom window. When you click it, and there's the little chat icon, when you click it, a pop-up window will open. You can just type your comments in the field that says type message here. And when you hit return, the message will be displayed for everyone to see. Looks like most of you have found chat, but just wanted to make sure. I probably won't be able to really follow the chat while I'm presenting. So my recommendation is that if a question comes up for you, jot it down so that when we get to the Q&A, you'll be able to remember what you wanted to ask me if I haven't already answered it during the presentation. Live captions are available. To access them, you'll use the closed caption icon in the Zoom menu bar. So there are 7 things you want to be aware of when thinking about making your content accessible. There are headings, images, lists, links, tables, color, and captions. And what we're going to do today is go over each of those, not in minute detail, but I will show you how to get a resource for after the call that you can go back to and spend a little more time with. But we are going to go over each one so that you have a better sense of what it is to make your Canvas content accessible. Let's put it into context first, though. A screen reader device, which is what many of the formatting measures are aimed at supporting, it's a device used by vision impaired students to help them by reading whatever is on a document or a web page that they're looking at. And a screen reader device can do things like move from section to section based on headings so that they can scan the page the way we do visually, or tell them when there's a list and how many items are in it, or when there's an image and what that image is showing. The screen reader device works by using code, basically, that's running in the background of that page. So the device won't work properly unless the page is formatted properly to begin with. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's dive into Canvas and get started. In Canvas, each page, and for our purposes, when I say page, I mean pages, assignments, discussions, quizzes, any place where you can add or edit the content. It has what's called a rich content editor. And you access it by clicking that little edit button, and then you've got this toolbar up at the top. It's very similar to the kinds of things you're going to find if you've worked in Word, PowerPoint, or something like that. Be aware that Canvas has recently rolled out a newly redesigned rich content editor, though as of today, April 8th of 2020, it may not be turned on in your college's instance of Canvas. I'm going to be demonstrating using the new version, since ultimately that's what we're all going to be using. But just know if you open up a page and the editor looks a little different than this, it still has the same functionality. So reading on a web page is somewhat different than reading a book. Not only are most of us in the habit of just skimming web pages, the medium itself is hard for the brain and the eye to process. If we want our students to really read and absorb the content that we're giving them in an online course, we need to apply good web usability guidelines. And that's really what the accessibility formatting is about. The most important principle is to remember to chunk your content. And this is going to help both sighted and non-sighted students. Section headings, lists, images, even tables can all serve to break up text into manageable visual segments. And when those elements are properly formatted, a screen reader device is going to be able to help a non-sighted student make use and interpret the information on that page, because they'll be able to use the headings and the lists and the images and the tables properly. I'm going to show you two versions of this web page. The first is plain with no formatting. And I'm going to make it a little bigger and then just ask you, just notice what it's like to look at the page and read it. And now I'm going to show you the same information, but with some formatting applied. I've added some headings, I've added some images, I've added a list, and just notice how much easier it is to make sense of that information than that first plain version that really was just a block of text. However, if the page isn't formatted using the editing tools properly, a screen reader device isn't going to be able to interpret this correctly. So that means even though it may look like it has proper headings or it looks like it has a proper list, it's all going to look like one big block of text to the screen reader device, just like that plain version did. So what we're going to do today is show you how to properly format those 7 things we talked about at the beginning of the webinar. So we'll start with headings. Open up the editor. When we're using headings correctly, a screen reader device allows a student to scan the headings and move from one heading section to another. If not, and they're attempting to read that page, or even more importantly, reread the page, they're coming back to find some information that they seem to remember is here and they want to locate it. If the headings aren't set up properly, they're not going to be able to jump from section to section and scan the content. They're going to have to start at the top of the page and have their screen reader device read them every single word until they find what it is they're looking for. So headings are both good for visual learning and also for a screen reader device. An outline analogy can kind of help. Headings are set up in terms of having sections, and then if you have a subsection, you would have a different heading level. So let me explain what I'm talking about. On your page, most of your sections are going to be main sections. They would be equivalent to the Roman numerals in an outline where you've got, your main topics. And for those, like my initial welcome, I'm going to want to use what's called a heading 2. Heading 1 is always the page title, and you never have to worry about that. Canvas takes care of it for you. So you'll always start with heading 2 as your main heading sections. This looks like it's a heading because it's bigger font. So as a visual student, I can look at it and go, okay, there's my first heading, there's my second heading. But if I'm looking at the highlighted text, it's only tagged up here in the rich content editor as paragraph text, meaning just plain old text. If I want to make it a heading, I'm going to use the drop down and select the proper heading level for that heading. And as I said, most of your headings are probably going to be H2s. But like an outline, if I had a subsection within this H2, I would then make it an H3. And if I had a subsection within my H3 content, I would make that an H4. But for the most part, you'll stick with H2. That's really it about headings. So let's talk about images. They come in 2 varieties. Images that are important for understanding the content on the page, and images that are really there more for visual interest. When a screen reader device comes across an image on the page, it knows because of the coding on that image, and it will alert the student. It will say image, and then read whatever alternative text description has been provided for that image. It's important that the alt text, as it's usually called, be meaningful, not just a file name or a generic phrase, because remember, the student isn't seeing the image, they're hearing it described to them. So if it says image, course icon underscore spring 20, that's going to be of no help to the student in figuring out what that image actually is. So you're going to want to use a meaningful phrase, or you're going to want to tag it as a decorative image. And I'll show you how to do that. I have the image on the page. If I highlight it, in the new rich content editor, you have this little options window which pops up. And right here, it shows me what my current alt text is. Fingers underscore group.jpg is not going to be of any value to a student that can't see that image. So if I felt that little image with the fingers was relevant to the page content and important for the student to know what that image was about, I would describe it, maybe say something like 3 fingers with faces painted on them grouped together to indicate a group, or whatever would make sense. If I felt it was really just there for visual interest and a non-sighted student didn't need the cognitive overload of trying to decipher, is this image important or not, I would probably tag it decorative. And Canvas very politely has a little checkbox for us. I can just click that, and in the code, it will now indicate to the screen reader, this is a decorative image. You don't even need to tell the student it's there. There's some other things on here which we're not going to go into, but just know that it's available there. The difference in the old editor is when you click the image, it will highlight, and then you would come up to the little, it's not here anymore, but I'm just telling you so you'll know. There's a little landscape picture icon that is the image controls, and you would click that and it would give you the same options of editing your alt text or tagging it as decorative. That's the basics on image. Lists. When a list is set up properly, a screen reader device is able to tell a student, here's a list with 3 items, first bullet, and then it would read off the bullet list. When it's not set up properly, it's just going to read it like regular text. So if you set up a numbered list manually and you typed 1 period space and then the bullet text, the screen reader device would simply read 1 period space and whatever the bullet list. It's not going to tell the students it's a bullet. This actually is what I call a faux list. I used a little bullet image and then typed my text. So it's not really a list. And the way I can tell is because in Canvas, when I'm on the text, there would be a little indicator above either the bullet list or the, well, in this case, it would be over the list icon. In the old editor, there's separate bullet and number list. So when I highlight this content, you can see it doesn't indicate that it's a list. It's just plain old text. If I want to make it a list, Canvas gives me the option of using ordered and unordered lists. Just a little side note, it's good to realize that technically you should only use ordered lists if it is something, content that is in a hierarchy or a sequence. So if you're giving them steps to a recipe, or you're giving them the most important whatever in a sequential order, you would want to use an ordered list. If you're just giving them information, like here, these quick links, they're not in any particular order, so I would just use a regular bullet list. And you can see it then automatically puts those bullets there. It even indented it a little, which is a little clue that it's the real list. And then I would have to go in and get rid of the fake bullets that I had created there. That's it about lists. And I'm sure questions are coming up. I will get to them at the end, so just be patient. Links is the next thing we want to talk about. When a screen reader comes across a link on a page, it alerts the student by saying link and then reading out the link text. In this case, I've got my email, or Isabel's email. So it would say link, and then it would read isabelinstructor@ccc.edu. Student would know its mail address. This link, however, is just, it's not actual words. It's not a meaningful destination phrase. So the screen reader is just going to read the characters. Same with this YouTube. It's just going to read link https:// and then it will read off the characters. So for that reason, it's important when you're creating links on your pages that you make sure the text that is the clickable link is meaningful phrase, is a meaningful phrase. And in particular, you want to make sure it's indicating where that link will lead the student. So in this case, instead of having the Confer Zoom link be there, what I might do more appropriately is highlight my virtual office and have that be the link text. So the student would hear link, my virtual office, and they would know exactly where they're going to end up when they click that link. If I didn't explain that in a way that makes sense, let me know. So we've looked at headings, we've looked at images, we've looked at lists, and we've looked at meaningful link text. Last thing, we're going to cover color, tables, and captions. And then I want to make sure to have lots of time for your questions. If we use color either as text or to highlight, you want to be aware that you need to make sure the contrast is high enough for low vision people. This one isn't dealing with a screen reader device because color won't matter to someone that's listening to the text. But if you have a low vision student or even a colorblind student, which you undoubtedly will, you want to make sure you're thinking about color contrast and color in terms of meaning. So let's talk about contrast first. In the rich content editor, and they moved it, so I'm going to go back down to the bottom. This little icon, the circle with the little man in it, and we often refer to it as the little man, is Canvas's accessibility checker. It can really do a good job with certain things in the formatting of a page. It's great with color. It's great with tables. I would not recommend relying on it for headings, lists, link text, other things. It just doesn't have that level of sophistication yet, but it's great with color. So I'm going to click it, and it's going to talk about alt text. So I'm going to skip that for now because I want to go to the color. And right here, I had my heading in a green, but the little man is telling me that green doesn't have enough contrast. A low vision student would have difficulty being able to read that. And if you'll notice, there's a little tiny circle in the middle of that color field. That's the color that is currently the color of my heading. If I take that little circle and move it, watch the apply button at the bottom of this and see how it turned blue. If I go back up, it's blue, it's grayed out. If I come down, it goes blue. That's indicating to me I'm now at a color that has enough color contrast. So I could even pick a darker one if I wanted to. But as long as that blue button is live, I can stop and choose that color for my text. Do I want to say anything? Yes, okay. So the other thing about color, in addition to, and let me get out of there for now, in addition to contrast, is if you're using color for meaning, you want to make sure you're also using another indicator of that meaning. So for example, let's say on a page you said, here's a list of questions, be sure to answer all of the questions in red. The others are optional. A colorblind student very well won't be able to tell what are the red questions. It doesn't mean you can't use color, but you want to use a secondary indicator as well. So you might use bold italic red, or you might put an asterisk next to the red questions so that you would then be able to give the directions. The red questions with an asterisk are the ones that are required. So you just want to be thinking low vision contrast and colorblind if you're using color for meaning, and just have an alternate way of indicating that. Yeah, okay, so let's go on to tables. I've got a table down here. Tables are great for visually encapsulating important information in an organizational scheme. That's their purpose. And as a sighted person, we can immediately discern all kinds of information just by a quick glance at a table. But imagine you're not seeing the table, the structure and the organization of it. You have to listen to it cell by cell by cell. It's going to be a lot harder to figure out what's the structure, how is this content related to it, what's going on here. To facilitate comprehension of a table for a visually impaired person, it should always have what are called table headers. Not to be confused with page headings, table headers are these sort of labels, either at the top of a column or at the side of a row, depending on how your content is structured. And it's going to let the student know, oh, this column is going to tell me all the tasks and activities. This column is going to tell me the due dates. So when they have that in their head, then as they're listening to each cell content, they're going to be able to make a mental picture of what's going on. Again, Canvas is excellent at helping with tables. So if I click the little man and I skip my alt text, he's going to jump to the table and tell me, oh, your table should have, first off, a caption. Basically, that's a title. It's just a little summary telling the student, here's what this table is about. Even before you get into the data of it, this is a description of what the table content is about. So I'm going to just call it weekly schedule, and it puts it there for you. You don't even have to mess with the code. And then I'm going to click apply. And then it tells me, oh, you don't have any headers in your table yet. So I'm going to use the drop down. And here's the thing to wrap your brain around. If your content is organized in columns, you're going to want to indicate a header row, because that top row is the one that is your headers. If your content were organized in rows, you would want to have a header column indicating, and vice versa. So depending on how your content is organized, you're going to use either a row or a column as your header. Some tables, if they're complex, might have both header rows and header columns. And so it gives you that option as well. But generally speaking, you're going to have simple tables that most likely just need a header row. And if you notice, Canvas made it bold, it centered it, and most important, in the HTML code of the page, it's now tagged as a header. So the screen reader device will be able to help the student comprehend the table. I'll click apply, and I'm done. The last thing I want to talk about is captioning. And when you're on a video, especially a YouTube video, there is such a thing as auto-generated captioning, where a application has a voice-to-text application has listened to the narration or the dialogue in that video and then created text for it. The problem with auto-generated captions is they are generally, they have no punctuation, so it's a single long, very long sometimes, run-on sentence that isn't going to make sense to a student that isn't hearing the words. Also, if you've ever noticed, sometimes if you have the captioning on when you're a hearing person and you're listening and watching the captions at the same time, you can tell that the word match is not accurate. That, you know, you're able to think, oh, that's not what they said. They said this. So the important thing for accessibility is to make sure your captions are what we call accurate. And that means they have punctuation and the word match is accurate. So a person has to actually go in and check those things. Most auto speech to text platforms, they're getting better, but they're not perfect. So you just want to make sure if you're including a video in your course that you check it. I usually watch 15, 20 seconds of it, and I'll make sure there's punctuation. And I'll also listen and read the captions to make sure there's no obvious word match issues going on. It's always a surprise to people when they hear auto-generated isn't good enough, because the applications have gotten more accurate. But what they're not understanding is that if I'm a hearing person and I'm using captions just to augment my listening experience, I can hear the verbal punctuation. I can hear when a person pauses between sentences or when they ask a question by lifting their voice at the end. And I can also hear if the caption has the wrong word, I can hear what actually was said. But imagine you're a deaf student who has no ability to hear at all. They have the cognitive overload of trying to figure out, where does one sentence end? When was a question asked? If there's multiple speakers, who's talking now? That word doesn't make sense. What was really said? So it's very important that you make sure your captions are accurate. We have a Canvas course shell that we've created, a content shell called Course Design Resources. And I'm going to show it to you now. It was originally set up for online instructors going through the OEI's course review process in order to align with our online course design rubric, but you can use it too. So some of the information in it, you may be thinking, I don't know what they're talking about. What's this rubric? Don't worry about it. What I wanted to do was show you within the content, my browser is being slow today, you're going to want to go down to section D, which is the accessibility section. And you'll notice when you get there, it's got some other information we didn't have time to talk about today, like what exactly needs to be made accessible. It gives you a little handy checklist. So when you're creating or redesigning a page, you can remind yourself headings, lists, alt text, etc. And then it also has there for you kind of crib notes on each of the things that we just talked about, the headings, lists, alt text, etc. So this is a resource you can come back to after our call today to help remind yourself, what did Helen tell me about headings, or what's important in alt text, and this will always be there for you. In the chat, I'm going to put the link. I created a bit.ly link so it will be easy for you to find. And there you go in the chat. I'm also going to go back to our slideshow because there is, we also have, well, I have on here the bit.ly link for the course design resources, which I just shared in chat. Do make sure you pay attention to the capitals here because bit.ly is case sensitive. So you want to make sure OEI and the C and the D are capitalized when you're looking for it. The CVC OEI also has a resource page at cvc.edu resources. And actually, I want to show you that one. Sorry, I shouldn't have come back here too quickly. But I want to show you when you are on that resources page, there's a bunch of information, but the thing that will probably be most useful to you, besides the upcoming events calendar, which will tell you when we have other webinars and our instructional design faculty support hours where you can come and ask questions. This first link, which has a very long, cumbersome title, Instructional Student Services and Shared College Resources Information. It is another Canvas content shell that is where we are curating all kinds of information and resources for you. And it's got a link to our event calendar. It also has a link to the webinar archives. So you're going to be able to find the recording for this as well as other webinars there on that page. So I just wanted to make sure you saw from here, because it's not immediately apparent from the title of the link, that's where it's going to take you. Wanted to make sure you knew that's where it was. And I'll go back to our slideshow again. And now I want to check with you, what questions do you have? I'm going to look through chat to see, how did I get the image options window? Adam, is that still a question? You want to unmute yourself or put in chat yes or no if it's still a question about finding the options window for alt text?
I think I figured that out watching you. I'm interested also in how you, what app or what link, insert, not sure what you even want to call it, you use to get the closed captions working here in Canvas today.
Okay, so not in Canvas, but here in Zoom, our system does have the ability, if you're doing an instructional webinar, has the ability for you to request that live captioning be made available if you know you're going to have a hearing impaired student participating. We don't have the funds to make every single webinar or class period where you're presenting with live captioning. It's very expensive, but if you know you have a student and you may need to ask your students, we're going to be doing live webinars. Does anyone need closed captioning, so that you can request it? And there is a form. I'm afraid, Adam, I don't remember where you find the form, but I would be willing to bet if you Googled California Community College live caption request, it's going to come up. I know it's through TechConnect, which is the grant from the Chancellor's office that deals with captioning and other things like that. I just don't remember their website. But you do need to request it in advance, at least 5 days, and they can't offer it for everything. So it does need to be an instructional session, and you need to know that there is someone who would benefit from the live captioning in order to request that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, yes. So okay. Just to follow up then, that means you have a live captioner today?
We do. Cindy is here with us. Thank you so much, Cindy, for being here and providing that. But yeah. Okay, let me go back up and see what other questions. And Stacy, I know you answered some. Was there any you weren't able to answer that you want me to go back to?
Let me see. I thought Susan had one. Did you say that embedded YT link is done correctly? I missed that. I think Susan, if you
on the YouTube link, Helen, did you say that those are done correctly for screen readers? So if you embed a YouTube video,
excellent question. Let me go back and show you what you would do. So where am I? Where am I? Here we go. So this YouTube link would be meaningless to a student who's clicking the link, or their screen reader, they're asking for a list of links on the page because they want to go to a particular link. This is not going to give them any information about what that video is. So what you would want to do is, once you've embedded it on the page, highlight the link text, and I'm just going to say this is a video about cute puppies. So I'm going to just type in cute, if I could spell correctly, puppies, at play. So now the screen reader device would say video or link, cute puppies at play. And the student would have a much better sense whether that's the link they're looking for and what they're going to find when they click that link. So you're able to edit whatever the original YouTube link was to make it meaningful text. Does that answer what you were looking for, Susan?
Yes, it does. And then secondly, above, when you talked about the virtual office hours where there's also a link, would you just
Yes.
highlight virtual office hours and instead
Yes.
of providing the link?
What I do is grab it. I'd make this my link.
Yes, okay.
So I highlight it, and I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to use Command K, but if you were on a PC, you would use Control K, and it opens up this lovely little dialog box. So I don't have to go into the code and do anything. I can just paste my link. So I've got my text, and if I wanted to adjust it, I could, edit whatever the text is, and then I can paste in the URL. And when I click done, it has now turned that into the live link.
Thank you. That's really helpful because I do embed a lot of videos and I use a lot of links. And it's really a helpful tip to use the text that you want so that the screen reader is able to let students know. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And one other little tip I'll add when you're creating alt text for images and also when you're doing video or links, whether it's to a web page or an article or a video. You don't, in the alt text, want to say anything like image of or picture of, because the screen reader device knows from the code that it is an image. So it's already going to tell them image, and then it will read the alt text. So you don't want it to say image of George Washington crossing the Delaware. It's just redundant. So your alt text will just be describing whatever you need to tell the student about that image without saying image of. The exception would be if it's important for them to know it's a collage or it's a, whatever the medium that the image is, then you would include that. But you don't include image of, picture of, photo of, that kind of thing by default. And the same with the link. With link text, you really just want it to be a very succinct phrase that indicates the destination. So you wouldn't want to make an entire sentence a link. Go to this website to read more of it. You don't need to go to this website part. You're just going to say more about government, our judicial system. That would be your link. The rest of the sentence would just be regular text. Hopefully I explained that in a way that made sense. One thing to know about a screen reader giving a student a list of links, it's going to give them an alphabetized list. So if you have a lot of extraneous text as part of the link, it's going to make it harder for them to sort through that list. You also don't want to have the same text indicating different links. So an example might be read more. You'll see that all the time on websites. And I always think, oh gosh, they need somebody to come and teach them about accessibility because they have 12 different links, all of which say read more, read more, read more. A student's not going to have any idea what the destination is for each of those different read more, read more, read more. So you want to make sure the link text is unique for each of your links. All right, what other questions? Carl, you've got a question. Is auto-generated text worth considering if students will be recording video of themselves and posting? This is a conundrum. So Carl, if I'm understanding your question right, it's basically in this class, I'm having students record themselves and it's going to kind of be a one-shot deal where they're, doing stuff.
Yes, so I teach public speaking and I'm wrestling with the option of either synchronous or asynchronous. I'm planning on some asynchronous speeches the students will record and share with their classmates. And I've been poking around and it seems like Flipgrid auto-generates captions. And I'm not sure if I should even consider that or if there's better options than Flipgrid.
It does. And the technically, the law says if something is going to be one-time use, you don't necessarily have to get it captioned. However, I would take the other argument of if this is content that is germane to the class itself, all of the students that are participating really need to be able to access it. And let's start raising the next, or they're not all young, but let's start teaching our students to be cognizant of accessibility as well, and helping them understand, if you're going to do videos, make sure they're properly captioned. Flipgrid does have the auto-generated. I believe it also allows the video creator to edit those. So they could go in and add the punctuation and make sure the word match, you know, if there's somebody that doesn't enunciate clearly, the word match may not be great. So they should be able to go in and do that. So you may want to consider creating directions for students on how to do that if you're going to use Flipgrid. There are other tools. Screencast-O-Matic is another tool that will both record and allow people the ability to edit captions. It's free. You can do a paid version for like 15 bucks a year. I actually have it because I record a lot of video. But you could have your students as another free option. You could give them the opportunity to try Screencast-O-Matic. There are lots of other things out there. Depending on your college, students may have something embedded in Canvas where they would be able to use that. I don't know about the editing ability if they're using the recording in Canvas. But does that give you some ideas?
Yes, and is it realistic as a backup just to count on the interpreter assigned to the student, or is that not appropriate?
I don't know if, I don't believe you would, well, I don't know what your college's funds are like, but through the TechConnect, you would not be able to have a live interpreter for every single one of those presentations. It would only be for if you were doing a lecture class and you knew you had a hearing impaired student, you would be able to, and I'm looking down here because that's where your picture is, sorry.
Sure.
You would be able to request captioning, but for the presentations, I don't believe those would qualify as eligible for captioning, the live captioning.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. There is also something called, oh, now am I going to remember what it's called? Let me go over here and look. DoItYourself Captioning. It's a YouTube browser extension in Chrome. So that's another tool you might suggest to your students if they want to, if they have a YouTube channel and that's where they want to put their videos that they've recorded, they could either use YouTube's captioning tool, or they could try the do-it-yourself Google extension and see if they have any luck with that. So there's all kinds of stuff out there. I don't want to pretend that I know about all of them or that I'm recommending all of them. These are just a few of the tools that I'm aware of that might be helpful for your students.
Okay, very good.
Yep. And KD is asking, are all YouTube videos closed caption? It sure seems like nowadays they pretty much are, but I have run across some that either aren't, or for whatever reason, the little menu bar isn't showing the media tools, so I'm not able to see whether there's closed captioning or not, because that little CC icon isn't even visible in the media player. So you can't rely on it. And as we said, you really can't rely on auto-generated, even if they are available. And Susan, you have a question you want to ask verbally. Please feel free to unmute.
Yeah, I have a question about recording lectures and ensuring that they're accessible for students, you know, ahead of time, so that I just want to do it the best way the first time. So I was planning to record my lectures in Zoom and post them. I'm going to do the lecture portion of my course asynchronously. And I don't know yet whether there's anyone who needs an accommodation. Is that the best way to do it, or what suggestion would you make for recording lectures for an upcoming class?
Zoom, if you record to the cloud, it will automatically generate a recording that has an auto-generated transcript next to it. So it won't put captions on the screen itself, but it will have an accompanying transcript. But again, those are auto-generated. I believe I think, I never use Zoom, so please don't, you'll have to confirm, but I believe as the video creator, you have the ability to edit that auto-generated transcript. So you can do that. Go ahead.
No, I believe that to be the case as well. And I
Yeah.
was just wondering if you had any other suggestion that might be an alternative that would be potentially more accessible. What would you recommend?
Yes. And the thing with transcript, often people say, well, if I have a transcript, isn't that good enough? If it's an audio thing, as your lecture may well be, I don't know if your lecture is going to have visuals with it or not, but if it's like essentially a podcast where it's just listening, a transcript is perfectly viable. But if you think about a visual content in a video, if a student is trying to watch the video and look over here for the transcript and then watch the video and read the transcript, it's going to be really difficult for them to figure out what's going on if they have to keep shifting their attention from one to the other. So if the content of the video is visual in nature, it's best not to rely on a transcript. So you probably want to use a different tool like YouTube, Screencast-O-Matic. If your college has Relay or any of those, Camtasia, any of those, where you can actually put the captions on the video itself so that the student is able to keep their focus in one area instead of dividing it. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
And then I'm going to do a little plug. There is on our, and then we'll stop because I realize we're over time. If you go to onlinenetworkofeducators.org, that is our @ONE website, and it's taking very long to load. While it's waiting, I'll put this in the chat. Sorry, I can't do two things at once. All right, there's our website and chat. If you go to Pocket PD and go to BiteSize Canvas, this is a shameless plug because I actually am the one who does the BiteSize Canvas videos. The reason I'm sending you here is there is one that I did on creating video for lectures. And let's find it. 4 ways to make sure your students are watching your videos. And it's just a quick 5-minute little thing that has a lot of different tips about making sure your videos are as useful and as engaging and pragmatically designed as possible, because we're all human nature. We don't want to watch a 1-hour lecture on a video. It's just our brains are going to zone out. And so there's things you can do to make sure if you are presenting your content in a video format, there's things you can do to help ensure students are actually watching it and not just thinking, oh, I ought to watch that, but I'm not going to. So just a suggestion. All right, we need to stop for now because I've already kept you a couple of minutes over. I want to thank you so much for being here. It was a delight to share with you, and I will look forward to perhaps connecting with you again.